Good afternoon and welcome to TechNation's Roundtable on CMMS. Today we are joined by Greg Scott, Vice President of IT at Renovo Solutions, Joe Stockman, Director of Product Design at FSI, and Al Gresch, Vice President of HTM Consulting at Phoenix Data Systems. TechNation Editor John Wallace will be our moderator today. Today's webinar, as usual, is eligible for 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Just a quick reminder to please join us for our HTM Mixer Northwest, which is being held at the Hyatt Regency Bellevue Hotel in Seattle, Washington next week. So that's July the 31st and August the 1st. Our mixers are a slightly smaller, shorter duration and less crowded event, but still provides valuable continuing education, networking, and of course, vendor engagement opportunities. So for more information and registration details, please visit htmmixer.com. Also, please save the date for our full MD Expo. We're heading to the Rose and Shingle Creek Hotel in Orlando, Florida from October the 13th to the 15th. So please join us for 3 days of education, networking, and the latest advances in medical technology products and services. For more information and again, registration details, please visit mdexpo.com. Now, as you can see, GoToWebinar has a new look, so you will need to click on the question mark icon located at the top right-hand corner of your screen to answer today's trivia question. So let's kick off today's roundtable by giving away a Swiss Meister multi-tool. So using the question mark icon, let me know the answer to the following trivia question. July is National Blueberry Month, so which state is the largest producer of blueberries? I'll reveal the answer and our winner at the end of the webinar. Now, if you have any questions for our panelists, please submit your questions anytime, again, using the question mark icon on your webinar screen. There's also some handouts which are available for you to download, so you'll find that in the handouts section at the top of your screen too. So, John, I will hand it over to you to start today's discussion.
Thank you, Linda. Excited to be joined today by this expert panel. First, let's go around the room and find out a little bit more about each of them, starting with Greg Scott from Renovo Solutions.
Yeah, so hello, everyone. I am Greg Scott, Vice President of IT for Renovo Solutions, and I do like blueberries. I don't know the answer to the question, but I do like blueberries. So I basically manage our development, hosting, security, and training for our CMMS that we use at our company and have a few customers use as well. And then, so my career began over 20 years ago as a BMET, and then through various projects, education, I worked in technology all across the hospital, and then eventually moved into cybersecurity, and then ultimately into IT leadership here with Renovo.
Thank you, Greg. And then Joe Stockman from FSI is also on the panel today. Joe, can you introduce yourself to the attendees?
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm Joe with FSI. I've been with FSI for 23 years now, and in the healthcare CMMS space for over 30. So I've been in the industry a long time. My role here at FSI is a couple of different things. One is, just working with our product team to work with our existing and potential customers on, what they're looking for out of a CMS, how that we can make the CMMS easier for them or more functional for them, regardless of sort of their role in the CMMS world. Everyone from the C-suite down to the technician is who we focus on. So,
great, Joe. And next up, we have Al Gresch from Phoenix Data Systems. Al, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I can see a pattern here. We're trying to one-up each other. So I'm coming up on 50 years in the industry. Most of that time I spent running a large in-house department for a 15 hospital system here in the Midwest, and then running capital supply chain at another Midwestern IDN. Authored and published the 2019 edition of the Healthcare Technology Management Manual for AMI. Spent the last 12 years in client success and healthcare strategy for different CMMS companies, and I'm now with Phoenix Data Systems, and I oversee the superior analytics and HTM consulting divisions of the company.
Thank you, Al. All right, let's jump right into our panel discussion on CMMS with the first question. For the first question, we will hear from each panelist, beginning with Greg Scott, followed by Joe Stockman, and then Al Gresch. First question, Greg, is beyond work order management, what should healthcare executives look for in a modern CMMS?
So I think there was a time when, the CMMS was really just there, or well, it was a requirement for regulatory and compliance documentation. But what we're seeing now is it's far more than that. And I think executives specifically, are realizing that there's a ton of valuable information that CMMS can provide them. And so I think the key is going beyond just regulatory readiness, which is still a requirement, but also, making sure that you're keeping up with what the regulations require, whether it's PM completions or how work is performed. Then getting into, should we fix this device? Financial visibility, forecasting, not just, did we fix it, but maybe we should be replacing this instead of fixing it every other week, and starting to look at decision making when it comes to capital planning in that financial visibility space. Financial or patient safety still has a huge component, especially looking at trends and trying to avoid problems before they happen, whether it's, adverse events or potential adverse events, missed events. So looking at, are the staff using the equipment properly? Are we seeing trends in equipment decline or, accidental, incidents when it comes to equipment? And basically, kind of a final area is cybersecurity. So, there's a ton of talks in this space about cybersecurity and these devices and how we secure them, what actions we should do. But really, the CMMS starts with the inventory of all of that information. So making sure the CMMS can handle, modern devices, basically, in the sense of, tracking operating system, network information, things that we're later going to need to look at, whether there's some kind of advisory or some kind of breach or whatever the condition may be. And so, a CMMS should be kind of this wealth of information, but it also then can represent a single pane of glass across those different areas. So, I don't think anybody in the healthcare space needs another system to have to go look and find different information. So, can your CMMS provide the, answers to the questions you're looking for in one view? Can it integrate with other systems that maybe already have views or have, some kind of dashboard like that? So being flexible and being adaptable for all these different needs within the equipment space, I think, is key.
Thank you, Greg. And now the same question over to you, Joe.
Yeah, and Greg put a lot out there, so I might be a little bit of duplication here, but the word I was going to use was configurable. Every department does run a little bit differently, so it does need to be adaptable to some of those different workflows and how a different department might run from another. But the one thing that really is useful is does it have a easy to use interface? If the technicians are struggling with it, or the C-suite is logging in and doesn't know where to go or where to click to find things, if stuff isn't just presented to them in the way that they want, they're not going to use it. They're going to rely on others just to feed them the information. And, that's something that CMMSs have struggled with over the years as they become more modern and more configurable. Those are definitely, things to look for when you're choosing or looking for something in a CMMS. And then, also, healthcare specific. There are a lot of CMMSs out there that try to do healthcare, focusing specifically on the healthcare market, particularly around the compliance standards, whether you're Joint Commission or DNV or one of the other regulatory bodies, making sure that that they support having those standards and those reporting capabilities within there, so you don't have to go to another system to get those types of reports. And then finally was the interoperability. As much as a CMMS would like to do everything, it just can't. It's not going to be your be all end all. So having it integrate with other types of systems is important as well. Everything from the cybersecurity, which Greg mentioned, to RTLS systems, to other types of financial systems or parts ordering systems. Those things have to be just so you're not doing duplicate entries in those systems as well. So.
Thank you, Joe. And then Al, the same question for you.
Sure. From an executive perspective, they're looking at it as both a tool and the supporting expertise from that business partner, well beyond regulatory compliance, especially nowadays, that things that will save both time and money by bringing greater efficiency and automated processes. Both Joe and Greg talked a little bit about that, how critical integrations are in doing that. I hate to break it to the audience here, but there's no healthcare executive who wants to hear about PM completion compliance. Those are table stakes, right? And if you can't provide that consistently, I'm sure they'll find somebody who will. But what they are interested in is, how are you saving them money? How are you impacting patient care? How are you impacting the bottom line? I used to do quarterly business reviews with all of my regional vice presidents. And one of the things that I would report out on was uptime on major modalities. Those are things they care about. Those are the devices that are generating revenue for them every single day. And I was so proud of the fact that I could report that we had 99.4% uptime on the linear accelerators in his region. His response was, "What are you doing about the other 0.6?" So, I mean, those are the things that they care about, and you need to view your role as a partner to the executive team. Most HTM professionals, if you ask them who their customers are, they'll immediately go to the clinical end user, but it extends beyond that to your operational leadership, your COO, your financial leadership, your CFO. They want to know what you're doing for them to solve their challenges and keeping your organization relevant in the market that they serve.
Yeah, and thank you to all three of you gentlemen. That was some good information. I appreciate that. For the next question, let's start with Joe. And that question is, what questions should health system leaders ask to determine whether their current CMMS data is accurate, actionable, and capable of supporting enterprise-level decisions?
Yeah, FSI started as a asset inventory company. So we actually, I spent the first 10 plus years here at FSI walking hospital space, inventorying equipment, going into the bowels of the hospitals, if you will, searching for things, going through, doing department sweeps and looking for that mobile equipment. And if I had a nickel for every time, a clinical engineering manager, even facility manager said their inventory was accurate, and it wasn't, I'd have a lot of money right now. A lot of people just assume it's accurate, or they do it when the hospital opens and it's not. So, I would, as a hospital executive, I'd err on the side of, unless it's a brand new hospital with a new inventory. And even then I would be curious how it got populated. Sometimes it's just from what was ordered, not necessarily physically in the building. So you'd have to be careful on those things. But, we still have a full-time crew here doing that all the time, 25 years later in FSI. But with that inventory, check also, to make sure it's actionable, accurate. Do you have rough counts? What's a hospital your size? The number of assets that are typically in a hospital that size. So are there benchmarking numbers you can look at? Are you following standards, whether it's in standards with categorization, your manufacturer models, a quick look at, just an export of all your companies in the system would tell you, and I'm sure everybody here has seen this with, I'll use GE or General Electric or G.E. As examples of, I've seen, I think I counted 18 different ways I saw General Electric in a system one time. So how standard are those types of things? And if you're looking at the details like that, that's what's not going to make it actionable. Like when you're going to look for a failure rate against a particular manufacturer model, if they aren't in there the same way, you're not going to be able to get to the analysis of that data to use some of the more modern things. I know we have, we'll talk about some of those later. But again, knowing what you have, is it accurate? Unless you go look for everything and do a validation, what is your asset onboarding and outboarding process? Do you have one? Those are questions to have. What do you do when you get a new asset? How does it go into the system? How do you make sure it's tested? How do you do, when does it go into the inventory? When does it come out of the inventory when you can't find it? All valid questions to ask your team, your clinical engineering manager, HTM leader, how they're handling those types of situations. And depending on how they dance around those questions or if they have solid answers, that'll tell you probably how you're doing how they're doing with the inventory. So, but you can't PM what you don't have in the system. So accurate inventory is the key to all of this. So.
Thank you, Joe. And then Al, same question for you.
Yeah, I guess the big question they should ask is, are you capturing everything? Joe alluded to it. How are things coming into your organization, and do you have mechanisms in place to capture all of that, right? Do you have a strong relationship with your supply chain? Are you part of the capital committee where you know what's coming in and you know what to expect, so that things aren't coming into the organization without your knowledge? How are you handling rentals and loaners? Do you have visibility over that? There are supply surcharge agreements where you pay the supplies and you get the equipment for free, right? Are you aware of all of those things, and are you capturing all of that? Because yeah, you're right, Joe, that you have accountability for everything, whether you know about it or not. And if a patient gets harmed on a device you don't have on your inventory that's been PM'd, not a great situation. And so beyond that, is all of your staff's time being documented, including both device hours and non-device hours, to help you understand where your technician time is going and whether it's going where you want it to go. If you don't have that information captured in your CMMS, how are you going to know that? Is your device data clean and consistent across your entire inventory? If you get a recall on something, are you able to determine what are the affected devices quickly, right? Do you have everything in your inventory with all the pertinent information around acquisition costs, service costs for the life of the devices in your inventory, recalls, network and operating systems for cybersecurity? Greg mentioned earlier that executives are looking more and more for supporting information for capital planning. I created a tool in the two organizations I was in, and a CFO would kill for that rich data that you have in your database that includes the lifespan of the equipment, where it sits in that life cycle, the cost of service over time, and when should we replace that? And with that information, even if they make a decision not to replace a particular thing, at least they know the risk of not replacing it, right? Like I said, a CFO would kill for that information. Do you have a clearly defined set of request, result, and fault codes that all of your technicians are applying consistently? You can't even do any internal benchmarking if you don't have that in place. And that's information that will help you support your AEM program. There's, when we get to talk about metrics, one of the things that we looked at is how are things failing in order to achieve a better balance of PM versus CM. If we understood how things were failing, and perhaps there are added steps we could put on the PM, we could reduce our CM time. And then are you tracking response times, turnaround times, and uptime? Those are the things that, as I mentioned before, your executive leadership wants the expensive equipment that they have available to clinicians, right?
Thank you, Al. And then we'll kick the same question over to you, Greg.
Yes. So I think Joe and Al both listed a lot of good data points and things that should be in the CMMS. And it's kind of interesting because, as technology evolves, it gets easier for us to capture information and kind of expand the footprint of the CMMS. But it all reminds me of something my mentor I had, former leader. He always told me, you don't get what you expect, you get what you inspect. And when having built this, been part of building CMMS and creating all these fields, what it really comes down to is I want somebody to go up to the technician, go up to the manager and say, show me, what are they actually doing? Pull up the last month's compliance report right now. Let's look at this data. Is it complete? If you haven't looked at a report and been surprised, then something's probably either been filtered or maybe it's been, maybe it's not quite right, because usually you end up going down a rabbit hole. Al mentioned kind of the 4% of, uptime. That's the kind of stuff that draws the attention. And that's the kind of stuff you see when you start inspecting the CMMS and start inspecting the use of the CMMS. It's like, okay, well, how many of, these devices do we have with this operating system? And if the response is, well, we don't have all this information, then you don't really have a CMMS problem. What you have is a data entry problem. And so you start having to ask questions like, well, why do we have a data entry problem? Is it, a matter of getting the data in? Is it a matter of keeping the data up to date? And, you can start talking through process and, not just, yeah, we have this great tool, but we're underutilizing it. And so you really have to start asking questions about the system's usage. I think, start looking for questions that you didn't know you had before you started investigating. And, are you looking, or are we, the users, are they looking for trends, or are they looking at just incidents? Dashboards are great if it told me what happened, but what do I do next? Does it give me that information so I can see, well, okay, well, this is a trend, this is where we need to go? Those kinds of questions start to come into mind. And then ultimately, because we still have a lot of regulatory and patient safety requirements here, it's if I exported and ran this report tomorrow to the auditor or surveyor, would it hold up? Is it ready to go? Are you as a team ready? Can I trust this, or does it have to be manually reviewed first? Because I think that really kind of tests the readiness of the CMMS and the team using CMMS.
All right, thank you, Greg. And then Al, you're up first for this next question. And the question is, with FDA recalls and advisories increasing, what's the most overlooked step HTM teams miss when managing device recalls?
I think it's two things, John. And the first is, am I getting all of them? It just seems like when recalls come out, unless you're proactively looking for them, you've got someone dedicated to do that. They're like pamphlets that are dropped from an airplane and hit every department in the hospital, and they may or may not hit yours, right? So I think the key there is to ensure that you are getting all of them. And how we did that was, we created a funnel of all recalls. It was a policy within our organizations that whoever got them, you forwarded them to this person in this realm. So we had a person assigned in HTM dedicated to that, but we also on the supply side had a person dedicated to that for disposables and other recalls. So that's part of it. Another part of it, though, that I think is just as important, I would say that us as an industry have a really, really good handle recalls that we get and know about, and responding to those things. And you need to replace this widget on this device. That part of it we've got. But what about hazard alerts? Oftentimes you'll get notices that state that if you use this disposable with this device, that bad things could happen, right? Do you have a plan in place for that to ensure that there's a high level of accountability? And yeah, you could just send them out to the clinical leadership and say it's your responsibility to make sure this happens. How do you know people have done that, right? I can just tell you, in one of the organizations that I was in, it was just assumed that would happen, and then a bad outcome did happen, and our CNE raised the roof. How could this possibly happen, and how can we make sure that it never happens again? And so we took on actually the moniker that we garnered over time was the recall Nazis, because we would get all of those hazard alerts. We would identify what clinical leaders had that device, and we had a website that would make assignments to them, and they had to sign off on them that they had completed that if it was make sure that this page gets into the user manual, if it was like train your staff at your staff meeting, there was assurance that would happen, or you'd run severe risk of being called out if something bad were to happen, and you signed off that you did it and you didn't. So I think that's one of the big misses relative to recalls.
Yeah. And then Greg, over to you.
I would agree. I think the process has to be consistent and repeatable. Every recall that comes in shouldn't be a new project or new fire drill. If you're doing that, you're doing something wrong, and you're already losing time in the process. So that generally means getting it in the CMMS, because I think we probably all been a part of that, where it's like, well, are we affected by this? Well, do we have those equipment? Does it match this criteria? Oh yeah, well, we already fixed it. Well, did you fix it? Is it documented? So if that documentation doesn't live where it can be easily recalled, you waste so much time just trying to track down the current state of things. Did we do this? Did we document it? So I think I think a big step is really just making sure that you have a process nailed down. It's in the CMMS. It doesn't live in these other systems where you lose visibility, so that you can report on it and basically show that proof of completion once that's done. So yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Greg. And then Joe?
Yeah, just to add on, in addition to just making sure you're getting all the recalls, are you identifying all your equipment properly? Again, goes back to that asset inventory. Everything goes back to the asset inventory. You'll probably hear me say it a couple more times, but is everything named the same with the same manufacturer model? Because if it's not, and you're searching, or somebody doesn't know that something's spelled a little bit differently or in there a different way, you might not be able to get that. Or was that company bought out by another company, and the recall comes from that company? Do you have that path of all those things in your system to understand all of the affected equipment? And then with any repair, documenting that you repaired it is one thing. That's important in your ITM program or PM program, as well as the recalls. But also, once you repaired it, are you documenting the retest? When you're, are you retesting that, rerunning the safety and electrical safety test on that piece of equipment and making sure it passes that afterwards, and documenting that as well. But to Greg's point, yeah, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. So how do you prove that you both, made the repair and also retested it before you put it back out there into the general population? So.
Hey, John, one thing I want to add too that hadn't brought up, but in my tenure, twice we were visited by the FDA and not to try and catch us, but to ensure that manufacturers were appropriately notifying us of a recall. And if that happens and you don't have your ducks in a row, that's not a good thing. So it's an important thing for the industry to do and take seriously.
Yeah, and Joe triggered a thought that I meant to mention and totally spaced on. So it's probably overlooked by the biomeds, but it's the advisories. So we talk a lot about recalls, and we get, there's a whole process and requirement to be notified for recalls, but advisories and CVEs when it comes to IT assets, I think are missed widely, because there's less requirement on the OEMs to actually notify you or risk management of these things. And so, there might be a underlying Microsoft vulnerability out there, and IT is going to want to know, okay, are we affected? Well, this isn't a recall. Yeah, it's not a recall, but it can pose an even greater patient safety risk than a recall. We don't know. And so, it goes back to, are you looking for those things? So just like, are you getting the recall information? Are you getting advisory information? Are you getting CVE notices from your vendors, from the vendors that are in that, software bill of materials, if you're lucky enough to have that? And then do you have enough data to correlate that? Because a lot of times it's up to biomed to answer those questions on the medical device space of, well, yeah, there's this big vulnerability hit the news. Is this device affected? It's an ultrasound, but it runs on Windows or runs on Linux or runs on some other operating system. Can I answer that question? Or does it take a fire drill and the whole team going out to, go collect information for a week just to find out if, we're affected by what's effectively a vulnerability or advisory, and hasn't actually reached recall status. So I think that's an important point, and I think we're going to continue to see that as we're in this cybersecurity, threat actor age, attacking medical devices and in this space. So, not trying to produce fear, but basically, let's be proactive and make sure we have the information we need to appropriately react to those sorts of events.
All right, thank you. Moving along, I want to go ahead and remind the attendees that if they have a question for the panelists, they can submit that, and we'll try to get to those a little bit later during the webinar. If we aren't able to get to all the questions, we will share those with the panelists so that they can respond. They can answer with an email and get that information to you. But our next question, we're going to start with Greg. And the question is, what's one maintenance workflow that biomeds still do manually that a modern CMMS should be handling for them?
Yeah, so one of the things we're working on right now is related recommended fixes, because I see a lot of, especially young techs or people that maybe have a new device. They're getting a problem, they're getting an error code, and the first step is researching. Okay, what is this? What does this error code mean? Do I have a service manual? Looking up service manual. If you have kind of a distribution list that you can query and say, hey, has anybody seen this problem? You may ask that, that group. Looking through the service history, looking through other model service history, has this problem happened in the past? Basically, that should be something the CMMS should address for them. We should be able to go, with AI tools, look at historical fixes, recommended documentation, recommended fixes. That we have to be careful in this space, because we're not trying to hallucinate and make up a fix that doesn't exist in devices. We have to be careful to follow manufacturers' recommendations, but being able to just do that search for them and eliminate, what can be really time consuming trying to track down an actual problem, that should be at their fingertips as they start through that troubleshooting process.
All right, and then after Greg, we'll go over to Joe with the same question.
Yeah, and I actually built a presentation around this one, and I'll be doing it at the HTM Mixer in Seattle. But the one workflow that seems that I see varied a lot within different departments is, what do you do when you're unable to find a particular asset or piece of equipment during the PM process? A lot of people do things differently. I've seen everything from just pen and paper to writing it down, post-it notes on walls of things to look for next month. But documenting that, and doing that in the CMMS is where you want that documentation. But what is the process? Are you changing the work order status to something? You're just completing the PM, and are you doing marking the PM as incomplete because you couldn't find the equipment? Are you looking at the asset status? Are you looking at when does the next work order come out to go look for that particular item when you're looking to do those? As part of your unable to locate strategy, are you automatically emailing the owners of that equipment? If it's a particular department, are you manually doing that process by typing an email and then getting that email response and then copying and pasting the response into your CMMS, or does your CMMS handle all that for you? So if you could, use some modern tools to build out those workflows where, a technician either just clicks a button or changes it to a particular status, and all those things happen automatically. And oh, by the way, when the person replies, oh yeah, it's here, it can, change the status back and reactivate that work order, and you can go perform the PM on that. That would take a lot of the burden off of the staff to document that type of thing. So there's my hour presentation in about 2 to 3 minutes. So so if you're not going to Seattle, you got the gist of what I'm going to be talking about there at that HTM mixer.
Well, and if you can't get there, we should be recording that too, and it will be available later on the HTM Mixer website. So for everyone interested in this roundtable discussion today, there will be some more information for you to check out soon. Al, same question for you.
Sure. I have to agree with Joe that it isn't just one. I think that you need to assess any action in your processes and workflows that prompts a follow-up action. For example, if you've got a failed PM, that's going to generate, that needs to generate a CM work order. Is that automated? In incoming inspection prompts follow-up actions that a lot of people do manually. Retired equipment, that you likely have open work orders on that thing, and you have to figure out which ones are open, close them out manually. There are just a tremendous number of things that are follow-up actions that you can automate. We have customers with over 150 automations that save them hundreds of hours annually. And so, like I said, it isn't just one. You need to look at all of your processes, and your CMMS provider should be able to accommodate that.
Good. Thank you very much. And then, Joe, you're going to get to go first and answer this question first, and that is, which advanced CMMS features are most underutilized in your experience, and why?
For me, it's the first name of Al there. If you say it wrong, it's AI. So we were joking earlier how people mispronounce his name as AI instead of Al, but AI is probably the most underutilized features of a CMMS. One, because it's new, pretty new. If you think about the life of the popularity of AI and ChatGPT, which changed the world, we're talking in what, 2 years-ish worth of time for it really taking off. And also, hospital IT departments are afraid of that information getting out there. What's going to go public? What's going to go into the AI world that they don't want to? So they're building policies around that, and some are just no AI, and then they're slowly relaxing some of those. Some want to explore it more. But even if it's not in your CMMS, there are things you can do, with AI, with spreadsheets on your local computer, although they're still going out to the cloud. So definitely understand your hospital's policy before you go tinkering around with it. But, in order to take advantage of that, it goes back again to those standard naming conventions, those standard company names, the standard categorization, the standard, are you calling everything the same thing? Without doing those, and again, that's the foundation, you're not going to be successful in your use of AI when you're trying to do that analysis, when you're trying to see which manufacturers am I spending the most repair time on. So when it's time to purchase, maybe I don't want to purchase that manufacturer's stuff anymore. You know, what are the trends of a particular manufacturer model? Which ones are giving me the most failures? Those are all things you can do fairly simply if they're all named the same. But it's something that, again, it's new enough, and there's enough fear and uncertainty about it that people are holding back on really using it. Even in their, you know, like I said, even if they're doing exports of spreadsheets and trying to do things that way, there's still a little bit of hesitancy there. But it seems to be going away. I see more and more embracing it as we talk to our customers. So.
All right, that makes sense, Joe. And then Al?
Yeah, so I believe it's integrations and I talked about automations, but integrations as well as a tremendous time saving measure. You know, Greg, you talked about a lot of new technicians coming into the field that, and you know, you're losing some of that industry knowledge and expertise. So automated test devices is one. And by the way, Joe, I did conference presentations on this topic and actually did some case studies with both Pronic and Fluke to show the actual time that you can save over the course of a year by implementing these. And I'll be honest, I was never a fan when I was in the field of automated test devices. I just didn't think they were worth the money. But we're at a point now where it's so hard to find qualified people. Literally every minute that you can save in technician time by automating processes and making them more consistent, I think is worth it. So automated test devices is one. ServiceNow or any resource planning platform, your ERP, whether it's PeopleSoft, Lawson, cybersecurity, of those platforms that help you automate processes, but they give you a lot more information too. I know several organizations that use their network monitoring tool as a means to determine utilization of devices, and that's it has been an elusive thing when you're looking at capital planning. You know, we talked about recalls. Do you have an automated recall integration? And so the question as to why haven't people been doing more of that? I think cost is one. A lot of times there's an extra expense to doing that, but you know, I've said this many times. People look at the cost of doing something, they don't really look at the cost of not doing it. And I think that's an important analysis to do. And I think that if you can do that analysis, you stand a much better chance of getting justification for moving forward with those things that will save your staff a lot of time and increase consistency across the board.
Thank you, Al. And then Greg, if you can add.
Yeah, I agree with both of those. And I think, you know, when I think of the AI, you know, usage and insights, one of the keys to success with any kind of AI enhancement basically is that the data is there in the first place. And so, you know, one of the things that I think is often overlooked is the mobile access for CMMSs, and more specifically, its utilization. So, you know, I can admit, even though, well, I guess this is recorded, but I can admit documenting my work after the fact because, you know, I went out, I fixed the problem, I did whatever, I spent 2 days working on something. I didn't document it in real time. I didn't document the specific hours that it took me to do it. So when we start bringing in AI to the fold and we start looking at, you know, insights around, you know, utilization, downtime, how long it took to repair something. We started looking at analytical dashboards on that. That data is often skewed when if the culture it hasn't adapted to really documenting accurately and on time. And so, that whether that's a mobile app or something that allows the technicians to capture documentation out on the field, integrates with other systems that's also capturing that work. That's a great way to augment that data. But we're going to, I think, see more and more scrutiny around that information. And so we really start have to utilizing, what tools or what mechanism can we get in place so that the technician can, start capturing information real time or get feedback in real time, whether it's, insights or assistance or whatever. Because I feel as an industry have operated kind of in this paper mode for a long time and then adopted CMMSs as a requirement. And now we're starting to see the utilization, and we really have to get in front of how we use a CMMS, I think, as technicians. And we've geared a lot of things towards executive views of things. Well, what are we doing at the ground level to make sure that the data is going in, it's clean and it's accurate, so that once we bolt on all this other cool stuff, it works like we expect.
Thank you, Greg. And then for the next question, we will start with Al. And the question we have is, how do you measure technician performance and workload using CMMS data? And the second part of that question is, are there specific KPIs or dashboards you rely on?
Yeah, so when I was in the field, there were a lot of KPIs that I tracked. And I guess the first one was documented hours versus available hours. Often I'll be asked the question, well, what's the number that you should put out there? And I said, don't ever put out a number. All you should ever do is require that your technicians document everything that they do, and I mean everything. Greg, you talked about real-time documentation. I will say that if you're doing imaging support in your organization, that is critical. How does a radiology department manager or director know when they can start scheduling patients back in that room? And I don't care how communicative you are with the staff, that almost never gets passed on, right? And so
Absolutely.
You have to provide a means of feedback. And when you do that, in order for it to be of any value, it has to be real time, right? And I told my technicians, look, guys and gals, our undies are hanging out on the wash for everybody to see. They better be clean. And the way to do that is to make sure you're doing real-time documentation. But as you say, Greg, if you want compliance with anything, you have to make it easy. And so, having a mobile app that allows them to do that. Documented hours versus available hours, productivity plays into that. Device hours versus non-device hours. This is a key one for me because the industry average, I don't know if you know this, but the industry average for what I call wrench time is 1,000 annual device hours per technician. Think about that for a minute. Less than half of the time that you're paying your staff is spent doing what you're paying them to do. Okay, where's that other time going? So you need to have that documented. You need to have codes in your system that capture that time. And I want to be clear about something. Never, ever have I used data to beat people up. Data is an indicator, right? And if something falls outside the realm of what you would deem normal, then it raises the question why. So, the inventory that Greg is supporting, it's taking him 30% longer to do that than the inventory that Joe is supporting, but they're the same thing. Okay, why is that? Okay, maybe Greg needs more training, or maybe the inventory that he's supporting is 5 years older than the inventory that Joe's supporting. So again, all of those things are simply indicators. We looked at devices per tech. by category. Obviously, the number of devices for general biomed is not going to be the same as it is for imaging or specialty biomed. We looked at, I'm going to run the risk here of alienating my dear friend Bin Sing Wang by saying cost of service ratio. I think that is a key, and the argument against it is there's no standard for acquisition cost on things, and every department or every organization is different. I don't care. Pick one, stick with it, and use that metric to improve year over year. Okay. And I mean, you can use it to benchmark tech to tech, to benchmark department to like department. I have many examples of where costs were moving out of an acceptable realm, and it caused us to look at why, right? And why is that? And we identified operational issues that were causing that, fixed the operational issues, and the costs came back in line. We looked at balance of corrective versus planned maintenance. I mentioned that earlier. At PM completion, but by day, right? I wanted to make sure that my technicians were making regular progress toward completion. And so we had dashboards and we looked at it day by day. And it's when you have a screen that shows that, there gets to be competition sometimes among the team to make sure that they're hitting their marks. And then there are a number of things that I reported up to my executive team, like work house versus vendor third party, response time and turnaround time, especially looking at in-house versus vendor third party, cost savings and cost avoidances. Like I said, those are the things that executives want to hear about. Downtime, especially on your major modalities. And then the most important, customer satisfaction. And relative to your CMMS, we pushed out an annual customer satisfaction survey, but we also had the ability with our CMMS to push out real-time customer satisfaction surveys, much, just a few questions, but you get real-time feedback that you can act on more quickly.
All right, thank you, Al. And then we'll go over to you, Greg.
Yeah, this is a topic I have a lot of thoughts about, and it's having been a biomed and having been on the other side of this, I've seen all angles, and when I hear the word technician performance, productivity comes to mind, and it's just like nails on chalkboard, I guess. And Al hit great points on, it's not about the productivity or how much time they're documenting, is the work getting done, basically. And I think the key is looking at those other KPIs, because that's really a better signal than, yeah, they logged 8 hours every day for the last 5 weeks or whatever. Because you really need to know, are they doing work? Are we getting things done? Are we, what's the first time fix rate? Do I have a technician that's struggling to repair something? What are the indicators I can use to kind of pull out those anomalies? Because that is a better indicator, I think, of performance than just, well, yep, they've documented their time for the week. This really gets into kind of the core, I think, of managing the people side of biomeds, and then balancing that with the equipment, because the fix rates are very difficult. You have technicians that work at different paces, but that doesn't necessarily mean one's better than the other. If there's repeat calls, or they didn't actually fix the issue the first time, or maybe that equipment is older, it has more problems. And so I think you really have to combine all of that together to get a real good picture of what's going on. All of that, of course, needs clean data. And if you're focusing on, again, productivity or hours and documentation in that context, then the system's going to get gamed. You know, if the most ran report is the productivity report or labor hours report, then that's an indicator there's something else wrong, which is, again, if you're looking at, hey, these SMs are coming in, you know, starting on the 28th of the month. Before that, you guys haven't done anything. What's going on here? You know, is the workload too high? Because, you know, maybe the repair rate's high, but maybe there's something else. Maybe there's a deeper issue there. So again, it's looking at, you know, the failure rates, the time between failures, the workload balance, again, around fixes, less around how fast they fix or how what that quantity is, and trying to kind of qualify some of those actions that they're taking in a way that's beyond just, you know, documenting labor time and looking busy effectively. So
Thank you, Greg. I feel like I should ask this question first. I'm getting a lot of good information from your answers. And now, Joe, what can you add?
Yeah, all great points by Al and Greg. So I don't want to repeat those. I had some of those in my answers as well. But you know, as CMMS companies, you know, we do have an advantage of being able to look across more than one customer at a time. So, and we might have years upon years of history of how they've performed, and different ways to measure that. And you know, you could look at things. You know, hospitals of different sizes operate differently. You know, a rural hospital is going to operate differently than a hospital. You know, metro hospital in a big city, or even a university hospital. And you know, it's interesting. You know, when you look at the you know, technicians per asset type of thing that Al was mentioning, the work does always seem to get done, but you know, it seems like the work spreads out to the staff you have. So though, you know, if you have that get it done culture, you might find that you could run leaner than if you have you know, the luxury of having a bunch of technicians. You know, are they going to do less? Are they going to, you just fit within the system because there is no urgency because they know somebody else can take over as well. Those are things that become trickier to analyze, but when you start comparing, you know, within across different organizations and systems, you know, and we do that by square footage of the hospital or by number of beds, or there's a number of different ways you can sort of split them up. You know, you don't want to compare that rural hospital to a metro hospital and look at the assets per you know, technician, or asset technicians per square feet, or however you're measuring it. But when you compare, you know, similar size hospitals, they kind of align with each other and how they're hiring. You know, there's published metrics around how many technicians you should have for certain types of departments, whether it's biomed or other departments with hospital operations. But like I said, comparing them across, you know, when you look at the big picture across, you know, within our individual CMMSs, and you know, one of my passions is how do we start comparing our data to each other? You know, how do we take data from our CMMS and compare it to Al's or Greg's? You know, and again, going back to standardized naming conventions, yeah, it's important in your own organization, but as an industry, you know, why can't we just have the same terminology? You know, why are we reinventing the wheel not only for every customer but for every CMMS? There's, you know, a different way of doing it depending on who your implementation person is. So, you know, that's, you know, if we can get to that level, and maybe, you know, Amy could help drive that across the industry, then we could really compare and really, you know, see how we're doing with things. So.
Yeah, Joe, we started a CMMS collaborative like 5 years ago, and went so far as to create a list of both fault codes and work order types that there were white papers published on, and that's, I'm seeing that's just now starting to gain traction. You know, but that's an important thing. One thought that sparked from your comments, Joe, I recall a technician telling me this. He said, "I know why you're so focused on trying to improve productivity and gain efficiency. You're trying to get rid of some of us." It's like, are you insane? Do you have any idea how many opportunities are out there for us to take on if we had the bandwidth? I'm not getting rid of anybody ever. Okay.
Right. I'm trying to hire more.
That's right. So that was one thought. And the other one was if your staff isn't documenting everything that they're doing, and you are looking to get into the realm of helping your organization do capital planning, how accurate are your equipment histories if everything isn't being documented? I have major concern about that. So I would suggest that if you don't have a data integrity policy, that you implement one.
Thank you, gentlemen. And looks like we're coming up on an hour, so I'm going to let Linda share some more information with us. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today. And Linda, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, gents, for your time and for a really informative discussion. Thank you so much. I'd like to encourage everyone to visit our panelist company websites to find out more about the services they provide to the industry. So please visit goames.com, Renovo1, that's number1.com, and fsiservices.com. Now, as promised, the answer to today's trivia question is Washington State. So congratulations to our winner, Jennifer Potts in South Carolina. Now, just a quick reminder, you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. If you've missed any of our previous roundtable discussions, please visit webinarwednesday.live to view our whole archive. We'll be back next month with another roundtable discussion on the subject of training. So please visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and, of course, complimentary registration. Thank you all once again for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.